The Life of the 1990 Chicago Bulls, a retrospective through the eyes of Michael Jordan on what he wants you to focus in on about those glory days in his life, the 1990 Chicago Bulls. So if you did not watch the latest episode, maybe you missed it. Perhaps you actually have something else going on and you just, or maybe you forgot about it. It's possible you forgot about it as well. Well, we will attempt to slay the fairy tale, not the dragon. No, not the dragon. The fairy tale that was this latest installment. Now, we knew going in, we're not naive here. We knew going in that this was going to be an attempt to hornswoggle dumb people. And sure enough, dumb people have fallen for it. So we have to point out and highlight this to the idiots amongst us, what was really going on here with the documentary. The storytellers laid it on thick. Is what they did. They absolutely laid it on thick. They downplayed the gambling aspect of Jordan's story and glorified, amazingly, his ability as a baseball player, which is just stunning when you lived through watching some of that and now you look at what the story is being drawn up by Jordan and the people around Jordan. It is fascinating. So let us discuss the question. Do you believe that Michael Jordan retired from the NBA on his own and that he was not pushed out to go play professional baseball? Now, I do not. Nope. Believe that Michael Jordan retired on his own. I think that is ridiculous. It is absolutely ridiculous. And I don't care how much these people tried to shove this down my throat and down your throat. It did not change my opinion. I've already made my mind up on this. And I'll talk you through and walk you through my thoughts. But we've got the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, a history lesson, and selective omission. And we will combine all these things together, and we are going to make an amazing meal of burgers, cheeseburgers, French fries, onion rings, a traditional all-American meal. Now, this is, a lot of this is still up in the air, right? And this did not change anything watching this documentary. If you watched the latest couple of installments, they went overboard in attempting to change history. And they really wanted to deny there was no such thing as any kind of suspension at all. There was nobody, of course, advocating on the other side. It was only people who were all drinking the Kool-Aid. Slurp, 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 who would be commenting on camera. It was a tremendously biased documentary. And again, we knew going in this was what it's going to be like. But when you see it, and then you think about all the idiots that don't know how to have critical thinking, you're like, whoa, what's going on here? I mean, you had these giant, what I call ego-filled hot air balloons. It reminded me of when you watch the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. You know, you watch that and you see all those big balloons. There's Charlie Brown, there's Bugs Bunny and all that, and they're filled with hot air. Well, that was essentially what we saw, a parade of hot air balloons. All of them, one after another, commenting about Michael Jordan in that period of time. And they were all handpicked by Jordan's team of spin doctors. You got Brian McIntyre, who spent his adult life working in the NBA league office, and he was one of the most vocal in this, the senior communications advisor to NBA Commissioner David Stern. It's hard to imagine that somebody who was David Stern's right-hand man would not go on camera and say, yeah, well, Jordan got suspended, and here's what happened, A, B, and C. All right, so then you've got this author, Mark Vancil, I believe is how you say his name. He wrote a glorifying book about Michael Jordan, right? And talked about that and said he claimed that Jordan told him he was going to retire a year earlier to play baseball. Yeah, right. I'm sure he did. Vancil also is an old Chicago Bulls beat writer. He was on the Bulls beat sucking the toes of Michael Jordan for the Chicago Sun-Times back in the day. So someone who I'm sure sees everything through the eyes of Michael Jordan, of course, unless he doesn't. Then you have David Stern himself. This was very odd. David Stern's dead. David Stern from the grave interviewed, obviously, a long time ago about this. And all of these men on Team Jordan, they have a vested interest in keeping the story out. It's like asking a mother on Mother's Day if her troublemaking son is a good boy. Yeah, well, what mom's going to say? No, my son's a punk and a loser and a dope and all that. The witnesses are compromised is what I'm trying to say. And as far as why would David Stern, why would he lie about it? Why wouldn't he be honest? Okay, let's look at this objectively. David Stern looks like a total Mr. Softy if he was afraid to go public with this, because you look at the damage, and they tried to point out when Jordan left to play baseball, said, well, look at the damage done to the NBA. But what would have been worse if Michael Jordan had gone and played baseball for 2 years, which is what he did, or a year, in Birmingham, Alabama, or if all of the skeletons had seen the light of day and we would have heard all of the details about Jordan gambling on basketball, which was alleged by some around those times, and the prolific gambling of Michael Jordan, and how the NBA looked the other way for years. I believe that would have been much more damaging to the NBA than Michael Jordan leaving for a year to go play minor league baseball in Birmingham, Alabama, but it's just me. Maybe it's just me. All right, now part B of this. Let me give you the full story here, not just the Jordan side of the story. It was like a revisionist history lesson playing out here in this documentary. There was an army of anecdotal evidence, all right, that all indicated Jordan. I'm going back to the time this actually went down, that Jordan was shadow banned by the NBA, shoveled off to play baseball for the Chicago White Sox organization, a convenient landing spot for Jordan. It was all hushed up, and much of this is the stuff that Michael Jordan does not want to be talked about. Thus, it was left out of the documentary. It ended up on the editing room floor. Of course, I would argue it was never even an option to put in, so it wasn't really edited out. But Jordan was being investigated for gambling. The NBA had a league-wide investigation. This was briefly brought up in the documentary. Some people in that time believed that Jordan's gambling got completely out of control and he might have placed bets on NBA games. It was never proven. And I was a young chap back in those years covering the NBA, and it was an open secret around that time that Michael Jordan had worked out some kind of hush-hush deal for an undisclosed suspension. And this was in the days before social media. This was in the days before text messaging was even a thing. People actually talked to each other. That's how long ago this was. So what's the counter evidence that Jordan doesn't want to talk about? The moment MJ retired, and I say that in air quotes, retired. All right, the moment Michael Jordan stepped away from the Chicago Bulls to play minor league baseball, what do you think happened? The NBA immediately dropped the gambling investigation. Presto, it's gone, just like that. Abracadabra, it vanished. They said, we're not going to investigate anymore. You're not playing baseball. They washed their hands with it. They said, finito, done. Then you got Jerry Reinsdorf, who paid Michael Jordan his full NBA contract to play in the minors. Now, Reinsdorf in the documentary says that it was because Jordan was underpaid. The reality is that Jerry Reinsdorf has enjoyed a public perception of being notoriously cheap. And now we are supposed to believe that he decided with Jordan, no, I'm going to be like Mother Teresa. I'm going to pay him his full salary. Come on. Really? Are you that dumb? Are you that stupid? It doesn't pass the smell test. It doesn't pass the eyeball test. This has all the trimmings of a quid pro quo situation. You leave. We will pay you the same salary. You're not going to lose any money. Nobody will know what's really going on here. We'll sweep it under the rug. And then you can resume normal activities. The investigation of you will go away. And they worked overtime in this documentary. The Michael Jordan signed off on documentary. The other part of it was he was a good baseball player. I was sparring with dummies on social media when I was commenting how ridiculous this whole angle was. And spoiler alert, Jordan sucked at baseball. There you go. All right. The quote from Terry Francona, you could literally see Francona's nose growing. He was like Pinocchio when he gave the quote. Francona, who now, of course, has been a successful major league manager with the Red Sox, not so good with the Phillies, and now with the Cleveland Indians here recently. Francona, who managed Jordan that year in the minors, said, quote, in my opinion, with 1,500 at-bats, he, meaning Michael Jordan, would have found a way to make the major leagues. Again, I go back to the point earlier, the revisionist history lesson, because this is a big one. Now, Jordan, let's go to the numbers. Jordan played in Double-A. Yeah, I hadn't played baseball in 14 years. And Jerry Reinsdorf said, well, the reason he played in Double-A is because we needed the media accommodations. Yeah, right. I'm sure that's exactly why he played in Double-A. Absolutely. This was like a glorified adult fantasy baseball camp for Michael Jordan. He had no business being on the field other than the fact that there was some kind of deal between Reinsdorf, Jordan, and the NBA. And so let's examine this, though. He played one season. Jordan batted .202 with a .289 on-base percentage and a .266 slugging percentage. He had 497 at-bats. In order to get to 1,500 at-bats, Jordan would have had to keep playing. Now, he was 31 years old when he played in the minor leagues. He would have had to have played until he was 33 in the minor leagues, and then at age 34 would have conceivably, by Francona's statement, gotten to the major leagues. Of course, you are no longer considered someone who's going to go to the major leagues like 99.9% of the time. You say, well, Jordan, marketing, what about marketing? I'm not going to push back on that. If you want Jordan as a sideshow marketing stunt, yes. As a gimmick, you could put Jordan in the major leagues. You could have put him directly in the major leagues, the White Sox, if they wanted to, from a marketing standpoint, because people love celebrity. There's celebrity worship. It's been going on way before recent times. It's obviously enhanced because of social media and all that stuff. But the other thing which makes it so hilarious, when you think about Michael Jordan, the baseball player, you know that whole hit to strikeout ratio? Jordan had 88 hits in his lone season in Birmingham. He had 114 strikeouts. And Jerry Reinsdorf has the chutzpah to say that if the 1994 strike had not happened, that Jordan would have reached the big leagues. This is revisionist history, which is the best kind, revisionist history, the best kind of history. Now, why is it the best kind of history? Because you're never wrong, right? You're revising what actually happened. And, people are lazy, and I dealt with some lazy people. People are stupid, and they don't realize how terrible Jordan was as a baseball player, so we have to point it out. Now, the last word here. We have to go down a very tawdry hallway. The death of Michael Jordan's father. And that was covered here and brought up quite a bit in this documentary. If Jordan, he retired supposedly because he was so burned out. He wanted to play baseball. He was burned out on the spotlight and the innuendo that was being reported about his father's death. And so why would you go play in the minor leagues? Why wouldn't you just go to some island somewhere in the Bahamas and just chill out for a while? Because the same NBA media dopes, the ones that follow you around and lick your toes, they just traveled to Birmingham, Alabama to write stories about you. That's all that happened. The same people that were following Jordan around, they just said, all right, we'll go ride around Birmingham and all the other minor league cities in the South, and we'll chronicle his baseball follies. But if you look at this, and we talk about things that were left out, the streets were talking back then, the whispers in the 90s, which I still believe a lot of this, were that Jordan's father, he was obviously murdered, but why was he murdered? The theory was that he was murdered because of unpaid gambling debts, not by Jordan, but by the father, who was also a prolific gambler, and supposedly a much more prolific gambler than Michael Jordan was. And so obviously this didn't come out, but they skipped over completely several key points, many oddities in this documentary. It's called selective omission is the term for this. You hide shameful episodes. You just sweep them away, cover them up, put a tarp over them in hopes that people either forget about them or don't even bother to go back and look. You're rewriting history. For example, James Jordan's body was not discovered in his car, but it turned up in a swamp in South Carolina 11 days after the murder happened. And even though you saw the documentary, there was a casket, there was a burial, there's a gravesite for Michael Jordan's father. Jordan's father was actually cremated by the South Carolina coroner's office as a John Doe before the body was identified by the family. Somehow that didn't make the documentary. Can't imagine why it wouldn't make the documentary. The Lexus that Jordan's father was driving was not discovered on the side of some country road where he was supposedly sleeping. That's the story that they want you to know, but abandoned in the woods near Fayetteville. North Carolina. That's about 60 miles away from where the body found after the car had been stripped. So there's a 60-mile gap here. But the most damning evidence is the timeline. A total of 21 days had passed before Michael Jordan's family members reported his father missing. Now, keep in mind, and this is all reported. I'm not making any of this up. It was reported by the Chicago Tribune, other newspapers in Chicago, media nationally reported it. 21 days had passed before Jordan's family members reported the father missing. His 57th birthday had come and gone, and he wasn't around. Nobody reported him missing. Let me repeat that. James Jordan was missing on his own birthday, and nobody raised an eyebrow and reported this to the police. He was last seen alive 9 days before his birthday. The father's body was identified via dental records, and I believe that's curious timing, Dr. Watson. The timing on that, this whole thing, it just reeks, this whole thing. And there were a couple of teenagers that were tried and convicted soon after the incident. One of them in particular is saying he didn't do it, and he wants another trial and all that. It was as of a couple of years ago. But it makes you wonder.